morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar on automating user administration for Landmark and LSF with IPA. Today, we're joined by a special guest. Brian Beaver joins us from Athens Regional, who is one of our customers and has implemented or is implementing this same process. And I thought it was great to have him be on the call because he and I have been working together to kind of get this thing working, and we thought it was really worth sharing the experience and some of the challenges that we came across. So Brian, go ahead and say hi.
Right. Hello, everybody.
All right. So as usual, guys, if you have any questions, go ahead and save them to the end, and you'll be able to type them into that chat window to the left. It will hold all your questions in there until the end, and then I'll go through them and answer them one by one. So today we're going to go through this presentation deck, but really want to kind of start by saying that the way we started all of this, but it was by a webinar by Glenn Rexling that is posted on the Infor Technology blog. I will be posting the link to that when I post this to our site so that you can review it. I think that without that presentation, you basically want to go through that presentation and start with what you learn from there, and then augment that with what we go through here. Today is really kind of building on what Glenn has started with his IPA flow, and kind of diving a little deeper and talking about some of the challenges that we saw when we really wanted to implement that in a real life situation. So why would you want to automate this process? Really, because as you know, back in just when it was just LSF, things were already complicated enough, but now you've got several other dimensions added to what a user is within the Lawson environment. So there's quite a few things you need to do. Obviously, you need to still create your domain user, but now you have to, when you create your LSF user, assign identities and roles, you have to create an actor identity, link the actor to the identity, create an actor context, link the actor to the agent, and then, send some sort of email notification to the user and kind of let them know that the user is ready to go. So there's quite a few steps, and this not only is it a little bit confusing, but it's actually quite time consuming. So we want to really talk about how to automate this process and how to kind of make it something that it's not just automated, but rather get guaranteed to work, and you have some sort of good visibility into whether or not it's working every time. So what we're gonna be discussing is again what Glenn did in his presentation using Infor Process Automation to automate the manual tasks in much the same order, and perform all the same actions really one by one within IPA, and then check for success and errors and send some notifications accordingly. And then later we'll come back and kind of show you some ways you can get a little fancier with it. So the challenges that we faced, and really it was kind of working with Brian to kind of see in a real life setting where we're really trying to implement something like this, what are the challenges? As you know, when you're building a proof of concept, there are certain certain privileges you have that you don't when you're creating something for a real situation. And one is being able to hard code values and not really kind of have to check errors as much and whatnot. But we found that getting the context property for the organization and then linking the actor to the identity and adding the actor context, and especially linking the actor to the agent and finding the agent to begin with, those things were pretty challenging. And then handling errors a little better became kind of a challenge in how do we, because there's so much potential for errors. I mean, there's, something like 10 plus steps in this process, and each one of them could error out. And really, how do you handle that? Do you somehow continue through the process? Do you just go to the next record? And how many errors do you really send out? And that sort of thing. How do you kind of come up with a clean solution and how to do it? And that may actually vary from client to client. And then Brian pointed out there was this KB article that talks about the resource update node not really being able to add multiple roles, so you kind of have to do that one role at a time. And that was a challenge that we, probably spent several hours on trying to fix, or Brian did anyway. So I think it's important, real quick, to kind of go over this the terminology, because if you're somewhat new to Landmark, and honestly I still get lost every time, and I have to go back and look at this document, what these different terms mean. So an actor is a user who can act upon a Landmark service, okay, and that's really at its core, that's all it is. It's basically just a user. An agent is a unique subject within a specified application domain. Okay, so for example, a requester within the buyer application. And then an identity is a set of credentials. Okay, that's really all you can think of as an identity. It's a set of credentials that for a particular Landmark service. So you can use, for an example, the single sign-on would just be like the user name would be the part of the credential. So there are a few different paradigms of how this flow can go. We've chosen the new hire using Landmark talent management as the system of record. You can do it as if LSF was a system of record. And really kind of that really drives where you're going to go find out where new hires are. And I know the screenshot on the screen is not telling you much right now because it's kind of a bigger flow, but we are going to go through each one of these nodes one by one. And then I will also make the flow itself available for you for download on our site when we post this webinar up. And you'll be able to download it and have some place to start. And this is actually, as I said before, the flow that we started with, although it doesn't really look similar anymore to Glenn's flow, it really is quite a lot of what he started with is in here. Brian, would you say about 60% of it is still Glenn's?
Yeah, the basic flow, the logic is pretty much the same. The overall steps that he presents in his webinar are all incorporated in here. It's just kind of the guts where some things were hard-coded and where some things that you had mentioned on that challenges screen that we had to work through. So when you look at it on the screen there, it looks the same, but there are some things within the guts that are very different.
Yeah, and in fact, I want to mention while we're looking at this view, and it's not important what's in these nodes, one thing you'll notice when you look at Glenn's flow, and I wish I had a screenshot of that for you, his is a nested flow where each one of these nodes is nested within each other, so it's multiple nested loops. We decided to go against that idea in order to capture errors that may happen further in. So really what we've got is a more linear flow where each node can fail and then each node can report the error and then go to the next record. Where with his, you kind of had this nested idea where if something failed, you would go to the next record and not really report that error specifically. And really, it's a matter of what your requirements are. I wouldn't say one way is better than the other, but this kind of worked out better for what we wanted to do, and it helped us create kind of a central place for gathering error messages so that we could report them. So we're going to start here with the start node, and I've tried to do kind of a magnified view of each one of these nodes as we go around. So I hope that it's clear, and we, like I said, we can answer questions at the end. One of the things that I wanted to point out here is we've got quite a few things kind of still hard-coded just because this is a debug flow. What you'll notice is, and actually that red arrow should be about 4 cells down, what I wanted to really point out here is the contacts property HR org 100. We've actually hard-coded that in, but there is a way you can go and get that directly from the system. Although, Brian, you can maybe talk more about this. You don't ever need to really get this again because it is really, that code doesn't change for the organization, right?
That's correct. In our situation, we have one HR organization that everybody is part of, so it's a single number. And I think you've got a slide here where we took a screenshot and showed within Rich Client where you actually find that. So right, there you go. So that number does not change in our situation.
Yeah. So if you go to the Rich Client and look at the contacts property list, you'll see the code for the HR organization. If you only have one, really go ahead and hard code it in because it's never going to change. But if you got more than one organization in there, you can build a simple query to get that out for you for each one of the organizations and then continue to use that. It's going to be a slightly more complicated flow because you might have a loop now, but relatively simple. I'm going to go back one slide just to kind of see. As you can see, we've got the dates that we're testing with hard-coded in just so that we can test. And then we've just got a couple of other things that are hard-coded in here. One of the things that I want to point out that's hard-coded is that business class name. It's near the end, third from the bottom. That'll come into play a little bit later when we're looking for the agent. So we've set that to employee. So this is our new hire query, and we've actually hard-coded an employee number in here just for testing. And the one I'm going to share with you will have like a hard code for the employee number. And really, all you need to do to basically stop testing, you can just remove that the condition for the employee being equal to that number. And then you're going to grab all the new hires. And really all this is saying is that where the start date is less than or equal to the testing date. And actually, you probably said that equal to testing date. This is just kind of a test condition. You're going to write your own new hire query, guys, because it really you'll have to have a conversation with the HR folks. One of the things I was talking about with Brian today is, the start date or the hire date or adjusted hire date or whatever you want to call, whatever field you go off of, may not be a foolproof way about going about this because, HR might hire somebody on Friday and then on Monday they might enter the record and they may backdate it to Friday. So if you're running the interface on Monday, you're not going to pick up that Friday record. So you're going to have to go based on a record creation date or something like that. And so I'll leave it up to you to decide how you're going to find who new hires are. It can be a little challenging in certain organizations. The other issue is sometimes you may want to rerun this interface for a very specific date again. So you want to have that flexibility kind of built into what you're doing. It helps to have a variable that you can kind of adjust, especially for testing.
Tan, one thing I might add to that screen that you were just on, that new hire query, I mean, that really is your trigger point for determining the data that you're going to work on. And with Glenn's presentation, his was built basically into a batch mode as well. We've started out that way. In a batch mode, you've got a lot of flexibility with this. Obviously, you can change those dates. You can set this up to run every day to look at the system date, or you can put in a range of dates like what I've got in there right now. But we are investigating, and there might be other customers that would want to evaluate putting this flow directly to run against the new hire process so that it's triggered off of that new hire service. So you can have a couple different starting points for this flow, whether it be the new hire process and then you trigger the flow directly from that, or you run it in a batch mode like what's being demonstrated here.
Yeah, I really like that idea, in fact, and with what we're going to show later, it makes a lot of sense to kind of tie it to a process rather than try to time it to a time of day. So I like that idea a lot. It's also a little bit more elegant, which is nice. This screen you're all pretty familiar with probably. This node, this is the RM update node. So this is basically on LSF, and if you've ever worked with automating your user administration before within process flow on the LSF days, this is probably what you ended up doing. You're going to create the user on one end, and then you're going to add some identity services on the other side. So really just kind of it builds itself as you go if you just click the build button. Only issue with this is I'm going to click next here. Nope. I'm not going to click next. Let me think. Right there on the left, the table on the bottom left there, that very last field is the role field, and we brought in a kind of something from our start node basically in there. And what we were talking about earlier is there's a KB article out there that talks about that there's a current bug with IPA, and I'm not sure if it has been resolved yet or not, but that only allows you to add one role at a time right now. So if you try to put two roles in here, the system won't work, and you have to kind of create yet another node after this that does pretty much the same exact thing but adds the next role. Do you have something to add to that, Brian? I know you were the one that discovered this.
Right. That second RM node, the difference would be on the screen there in the middle where you see action and add. So for the second one, you do an update. The left side of the screen there under resource, you just have your second role that you want to add, and there's an option where you can choose append. So you append that second role. Then the other thing that was kind of interesting is you have to re-add those services again. The first time I added that second node, my intention was just to add that second role. That was the only thing it needed to do. But what I found was after I did that, it deleted the services. So that second RM update node that I have, in addition to adding that second role, it adds the services. It lists those services again.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, because otherwise you're going to wipe them out. Yep. All right. So then, naturally after that, you're going to go ahead and build your. You're going to create your actor. Really, nothing special about this one. This an easy one because you've got all the information you need to create your actor. You're going to use the. Let's see here. The create, update, and delete action type. Where's the thing? Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay, there we go. Yeah, you basically the object name is actor, and you're creating the action create. So there's not much to that node. Anything to add there, Brian? I don't think there was any.
No, the only other thing I might add, there's going to be some folks that are going to look at this and they're going to see that a lot of things here are triggered by what we have listed as a legacy employment number. When you watch Glenn's, everything is based on an employee ID. That's just the way. That's the way we do things here, as far as our actor and our RMID through the LSA tool. We use what we've determined here to be a legacy employment number, which is basically a network ID. So don't let that anywhere you see that, if you were to look at go back and look at Glenn's, you'll see something that'll look more like an employee rather than legacy employment number.
Oh, I'm glad you pointed that out. Yeah, that's something. So in case you missed what Brian just said, the fact that the legacy employment number is being used here, that's just what Athens uses for their user IDs. that doesn't mean you want to put the employee number necessarily in there. You want to put your user ID in there. It just happens that for Athens that is what that number is anyway. So we're using that. Thanks for pointing that out, because that could confuse people. So then we're going to create the identity, and here we're going to, as you can see, there's really not much here that's going to be complicated. We've got the this LDAP password here. That's just it doesn't matter, I think, what you put in there, right, Brian? It's just you just need.
That's right.
You just need to put something, right?
Yeah, you have to put something there. You can't skip it. We're LDAP bound, so we're using AD for any kind of authentication. But for that ad, you have to put something in there. So both that LDAP password and that identity service that are both listed there are both variables defined in the start node.
Right. And then you want to link your actor to the identity. So for this, you're going to need the actor ID for the actor that you created, and that's available to you. And you're going to need the identity ID also for the identity you just created, and that's not available to you. Now the actor is actually for Brian. That's still just a legacy employment number. But the identity, again, comes from that previous node that we just created. So that you're using the assign existing identity to actor action to perform this. And again, this was also not a point of complication. This was kind of relatively simple to do. And guys, as you're doing these, I recommend disabling all the following nodes and going through these one by one to get them to work, because cleaning it up is actually a lot of work. Brian, remember we had to spend 10 minutes cleaning up each time we ran this, because you got to go through the rich client and literally find every little thing you just created, and you got to go and delete it in order to kind of really. And I'm talking about debugging here. I'm not talking about once you're done, but when you're debugging this thing, you're gonna be creating lots and lots of stuff all over Landmark that you're gonna have to go and clean out. So I would add nodes when you're done with the previous one. Don't put them all in there and start adding a bunch of stuff in here, because it's just gonna prolong how much work you have to do. And we were doing that originally.
Yeah, definitely take advantage of that breakpoint.
Yeah.
Breakpoint capability.
And if you're not familiar with the breakpoint capability, that's kind of a new IPA feature that wasn't available to you within Process Flow, but you can set breakpoints at specific places, and you can tell it, hey, I want the flow to stop here and not continue any further, and then you can decide what you want to do when it hits that breakpoint. So here we're just adding a role. Again, nothing special about this. We're referencing the actor and the role that we want to add. And I've skipped one node here, as you can see up near the top. I've gone from this one and I've skipped the second role add. So the second role add is just another role that we're adding, guys. So there's nothing special about that one. That's why I skipped it. So we just added 2 roles basically. And now we want to add the context, okay, the actor context. Okay, so this was a little tricky, I think, because you need the actor in here and then the context property for the organization. And I think the reason maybe this was tricky was, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I think, you just, the nickname is actor context and you're just creating it.
Right, and this is one of the ones where when you watch the Infor training one, that context property, it's hard. There's a hard-coded number in there, and it wasn't very clear actually where that came from. So I think it's helpful here that we've shown kind of where within the rich client where that's defined, and that if you are a company where you have a single HR organization number like that, then you can just pop that number in your start node and reference it that way.
Yeah, so you basically want to go and look at your contacts property list within your application product line. So here we're in LTM Dev, and your HR organization is the key field, and you can pick that unique ID. And again, like I said, if you only have the one HR organization, you can just go ahead and hard code that in. You're probably never going to need to update that, and that should work out well for you. So moving on. Okay, I'm going to skip this one. I'm going to come back to it. Okay. So the next thing we really want to do is we want to link the agent to the actor. Okay. Now this was probably the trickiest thing we had to do, and this was hard coded in Glenn's. I think the agent ID was hard coded in Glenn's presentation. Is that right, Brian?
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So the trouble is, when you do this in real life, the agent ID isn't hard coded. So you got to go figure out what that is, because if you want to link an agent to an actor, you got your actor. That's not a problem. But you're going to need to know what's my agent ID. So I'm going to go back now and show you how you find that. Now, how you find that within, and it's important to know how to find it within the application. So how you find it within the application is not actually that trivial, because you got to go to your agent list, and then you got to filter on this key field on the right, where you see that 100, comma, 1,000,001 or whatever that number is. That is the employee, right? That's
the employee ID. That 100 is the HR organization. Yep. Right.
So if I were to click on this and actually explore a little further into that record, then I would be able to see the agent ID that is representing, that key pair is representing. Trouble is, there is no quick way to say I want to see this agent ID other than just going through and literally narrowing it down to this one record. So when it comes to actually finding it, it can be quite difficult. And the key is, in your Landmark Transaction Builder, you got to switch to the Properties tab. And this is, if there's one reason to have this webinar, guys, this is it. Because this probably took us a little longer than it needed to.
Yep.
On this Properties tab, you need to create this filter string there's no way to search for this any other way. You got to filter, okay? Because you're going to get all the records back. And this is actually a multi row query that you're going to do, but you're only filtering on the one. And you're filtering by the HR organization, which is in this case 100, and the employee ID, and where the business class name is employee. And remember, I showed you on the start node where we set the business class name to employee. And that's the only way you're going to get that agent ID back. And we're just talking about this agent where, for the business class as employee. I mean, if you got other business classes you got to add, you got to consider that. But for employees, certainly, like if you've got requester, you got another thing to do. But for employees, certainly, this is the key string you're going to want. So now I'm going to go back and show you what this looks like. And hopefully you can see on the screen, we've got the key text. So that's about the fourth line down. And when you build this, it will build this for you, so you don't have to type any of this in. But it says where the key text is the new hire organization, comma, the new hire employee, and that's all in double quotes. And the business object is the business class name, okay? But it's also very important, and this could be the part that confuses the heck out of you, is the action type is a multi-record query, even though you're really only trying to get one record back. This is actually what confused me the most, because I knew I just wanted one record back. If I got two records back, I would be in trouble, right? Because I only need the one. But you can't do this filter business with a single record query. You got to do a multiple record query and set that filter to get your one record back. I mean, this is not the best tool for doing this query, but this is the way to do it using this tool. So I'd say if there's something that's going to confuse you going through Glenn's presentation and using his flow, which again, we're using most of his flow here, and it was a really great tool for us to get started. The one thing that's really going to stop you is this one node. So remember, slide number 18 is where you want to go when I make this available to you. So I'm going to go past this. And then after that, it's easy because now you've got your agent, you've always had your actor, and all you got to do is do the action of link to actor, and then that just takes as its argument the agent and the actor. And it links the agent to the actor. And that's really it. The rest of what we're doing here is just a little message gathering and sending out some notifications. The error notifications that we've got here, as you see, all of those red lines going to that center message builder. So each one of those, as it errors out, it writes to that message builder. And if it's that message builder sends an email out to probably Brian, right, Brian?
Correct.
So that goes to you. And then at the end of that, you've got a email. I'm sorry, in the success end of things, you've got an email that would go to the employee if everything succeeded by that point. And that email is basically welcoming the employee to the organization and saying, here's your credentials, or maybe here's how you log in and whatnot. And that's about it. I mean, you can get fancier, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I've got a link on the screen that you can go to if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and share on my screen what we've created here, and you can go to this link to try it out. This is real data, and you can actually play around with the screen. So what you can do, and this isn't unique to this flow. You can do this with any flow. You can build a relatively simple HTML page that does a query against a custom database you're going to build. This is a single table database, guys, not very complicated. And what you can do is that at stages within your flow that you want to keep track of things, you can start writing to this database table. So for each work unit that has to do with this interface, I'm writing a record to this table saying, hey, I'm getting started on I'm doing Brian, you can see my screen, right? Just making sure.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. I'm writing a record saying that I'm going to get started on, for example, Amy Berkey's record there, and then as I go through, I can decide when I want to let this database know when I've gotten to a next stage in the process. And if I ever error out, I certainly want to let it know that it errored out. Now, the reason for this is, in Brian's case, he's going to have to do, how many records a week do you think you're going to have to add, Brian?
We have, we hire approximately 20 to 25 people every couple of weeks.
Yeah, so that's a good enough volume where things could get lost. Now, I've got a customer who may or may not be online with us right now, and they've got, they go through, I'd say, several hundred a week because they're a staffing organization. Okay, so they got temporary workers that are coming in and out, and for them, it's crucial to have a view like this. Now, if you only have one or two, you probably can keep track of it manually. But right about where you are, Brian, right at about 15 to 25 or so, things can get kind of mucky, and you're like, I don't really know if, because those notification messages, you get some notification fatigue, right? You'll get all these messages in your inbox, and you're not going to want to check them. So what this does is it gives you a real good view of what's failing and what's succeeding. And in this batch, I've made sure I kind of shown all the different statuses and lots of them. So there's not a lot of successes here, but I've got, a good 1,000 records in here that you can see. And you can write it out to this database, and what this HTML is doing is basically allowing me to go through and view it at real time out of that database. And like, for example, if I wanted to look for Jason, I can just say, okay, well, there's Jason Gomez, that succeeded, but I got Jason Duncan, who's still in progress, . I got this normal Gordon, and this is test data, obviously, that errored out, and that's something I want to do something about. Now, you're not going to have a lot of in progress, even though here I've made sure there is a bunch in progress, but it's always good to go through and make sure that you know what your errors are. And so what this is error adding actor. Actor already exists. So I can capture those errors and actually keep them within that database. And then I can either delete this error saying, hey, I've resolved this on my own manually, because you're going to have to do something manually at this point. Or I can, just close the window and keep it there. And what's nice is you can tell, for example, how many tasks are in progress, how many things have errored out, and whatnot. Keep notifications for yourself. And those notifications that normally would go out to your email box, you can actually send them out to yet another place where you can keep track of your notifications also. And then you can get a good view of what kind of completion rate you've got on your tasks. And this isn't something that's that difficult to build, guys. Anybody can build this. You can build this in-house relatively quickly. It's basically just doing a query on a table. So, I think it's a crucial part of kind of doing an interface like this, because it gives you some accountability to being able to go back and seeing the success rate and failure rate. So this only took about a day to build, the flow took way longer than that. So I think it's definitely a worthwhile investment in, if you're building a flow like this to automate, give yourself some time to build some way to monitor that, because this isn't the kind of information you want to lose. And keep in mind, you can do this for all your flows, not just for this. You can write at any point of a flow into a database and then create an HTML page for yourself to be able to query that data. And even if you don't create the HTML page, you can always do a SQL query to kind of see the update. The reason we're doing this, guys, is because it's kind of a small nightmare to go and try to find where working it failed and whether or not it succeeded, what stage it's in. You could waste a lot of time doing that, whereas a single view that tells you exactly what you need to know is kind of the way to go. And Brian, I think we're going to be putting this in for you guys, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's go back to the deck here.
Tan, one thing that you mentioned earlier in the presentation that we might want to just speak about a little bit more, and I think after this flow is built, it's not much of a stretch to get from this to go backwards through the flow to undo individual steps or to terminate an employee, and I mean that's probably one of our next steps, and it would be a good exercise for people who are starting to implement this, because it really does take a lot of time to clean up. And for the most part, this flow, starting from the end, working backwards, would undo each individual step, with a few exceptions. But it would be very handy as people start to try and implement this into a production environment.
That is a really good point, and that's something that you and I talked about really early on, guys. And you'll notice the value of that as soon as you start building this flow, because the minute something fails, and it may not fail in the first or second step, it may fail, adding you're linking the agent to the actor, for example. And if that has failed, you got to have a business decision there where you say, well, if that's failed, that's okay. I can go ahead and manually fix that. Or you might say, well, if something fails, I actually want to reverse all of the stuff that's been done so that it's a fresh record again. And then I can go through and manually do it, or I can resubmit it through the process. And the way to do all of that is actually relatively simple. You take the flow that you've got now, and you start building it in reverse. And instead of adds, you do deletes. And instead of joins, you do unjoins or links, and you do unlinks, and that sort of thing. And you got to go through and test the heck out of that, obviously. But it's worth every minute of your time to put that together because it'll pay you back in hours, because cleaning up this stuff is not fun to do once something errors out. You know, you probably have to open, I'd say you probably need to open 12 or 15 Landmarks rich client screens in order to clean this up, if not more. So it's definitely worth it. And I think we kind of put a plan together how to do that at some point, didn't we, Brian?
Yeah. It's just on the list of things to do. But you know, the process to do that actually shouldn't be too difficult now that we're at this point.
Yeah. So, and in fact, I think once we've done that, I don't mind sharing that with the group here too. So we'll share this flow with you guys, and then we'll post the other one up if we ever are successful in building it well. But keep in mind, any of the stuff that we share with you, it was built for Athens, and it may not work for you out of the box. So you got to get in there and you got to do it node by node, because you're dealing with some dangerous nodes here that can kind of do some damage. So any other comments or anything like that, Brian?
No, other than and this is a question that somebody just posted up that reminded me of that I need to comment on this. So this is for our users, kind of a generic create our users. I mean, 95% of what we've got to do, this flow will take care of. We've got a handful of people that may have specialized roles, specialized groups that they have to be in, and then we have to go in and we have to tweak those. But this gets the bulk, and the point of this was, before this was in place, we had folks that would spend hours creating users, doing what this does. So the point of this was just to automate that, and the people with specialized roles and so forth, we still have to manually go in and tweak those.
Right. Yeah. So it's really good for just the of the application. I don't think that'd be pretty. You'd have to put in a lot of checks and balances in place for that to work correctly. So just a quick note about general education type stuff. You can see all our webinars at nogales.com/education. There is a few dozen in there, and lots of different topics. And what you see on the screen right now, and that little screenshot, you see a little form to the right of that. That is how you can request a new topic for a webinar. We take all of the webinars that we do come from your suggestions. So please don't be shy. Go to nogales.com/education. You don't have to give us any of your personal information. Just give us a suggestion. If you want to put a fake name in there, you're more than welcome to do it. We just want the suggestion. So go ahead and send us what you want us to do, and I'll work on it. And the team here will work on it. We'll get you a half hour to an hour presentation of what you want to hear. And with that, I'm going to go and open it up to questions, and I'm going to scroll way back up. And Brian, if you don't mind doing the same, we can go through and answer all of these. One point about any meeting, guys, and this actually came up with Brian today. You can't, when you sign up for a webinar, you can't share that link with other people, because what happens is when you log in and they log in, they'll kick you out. So just have them sign up also, because there's only 200 seats available, and as of the current moment right now, all 200 are taken up. And what happens is if you're sharing that link is specific to you. That'll kick you out of the session when they log in. So you don't want to do that going forward. So Donald, yes, we have the sample flow, and the sample flow will be posted on our site. Those of you who have signed up for the webinar, we've got your contact information on the email. You'll get an email when it's posted back up, and that's really the only email you'll get regarding this. So let's see, what else?
There's an interesting one after that from Thomas mentioning, can this create AD accounts also? So that's something that we're working on incorporating as well. At the beginning of this, it wouldn't be a stretch to add a system node that could be that could go out and call existing PowerShell scripts, right, to create new users, and that's what we're looking to do now. Incorporate that front end piece of creating the Active Directory accounts before the loss in users.
I think if you go under the education section of our site, in a previous webinar, we've actually posted that PowerShell script you need to use. And if not, I will go ahead and post it with this one again. We've got a PowerShell script for adding users to AD users, basically. Works real well. Several clients have used it, and you can have it for free. And Brian, I'll send that to you over too.
Okay, great.
So Chris says that 10.1.1.30 solves the role issue. That's good to know. We'll have to find that for you. Yeah.
We're actually on 10. We're on 10.1.1.23, so that is good to know.
Yeah, and I know 32 is out now. I was just checking yesterday. So maybe 32 breaks it again.
Possible.
What IPA version is used for the webinar? Good question. I actually were, let's see.
Well, I guess you just said it. 10.1.1.23. Yeah, 10.1.1.23 was what most of this was built off.
Yeah. Now, so Glenn asked, the employee ID we use uses names first and last. Do you have a formula for avoiding duplication? Unfortunately, there isn't a formula I can just give you that would avoid duplication. You kind of want to depend on the whatever it is that's creating your AD account, and you could create some sort of intermediary table that you're going to pull that information from, that another interface maybe writes to, just if you want to really fully automate the process. But typically, for something like that, you want to be storing that account somewhere that you're going to pull it from, because otherwise you're not going to know. There are customers we've worked with that have come up with different schemes, and it works 99 out of 100 times, but there is that one time that it breaks, especially when it comes to things like rehires and things like that. When people come back and they try to reclaim an ID that they used to have or something like that, there's ways this can break, guys. This is still not a foolproof method. You'd have to do a ton of error checking for things to work 100% of the time, and it's really not worth it, because those things that happen 1% of the time, you don't want to spend most of your time coding for that. That's why we have that error screen that we built. Just go through that once a week or something like that, or once a day. You can look at your error screen and you can find out what errored out and fix it manually. That would be my suggestion. Sure, you can put more error checking in for sure, but there's little to be gained, I think, from making it too much better. Let's see. So Jonathan asked, does that IPA version work with what, with which Infor environment? Like we said, so we're doing this with Landmark 10.1.1.23, and it should work with any other versions of the application. I can't think of why it wouldn't. There's nothing new or old in this. In fact, with the newer versions, you will have less issues. For example, that role issue. So there's no reason for me to believe that it wouldn't. So Michael mentions that something you should mention is a federated environment with LSF is that ISS will not know about the new actor until you manually rebuild the resource index in SSO config and or performance sync in ISS. Then you will be able to search for the actor to make any needed changes to the actor within ISS. Now, if your environment is federated, which every single one of them should be at this point, and if you're not, you got to get on top of that. Then the syncing should be happening for you, based on the rules you've set up and automatically. So I'm not sure what the concern is specifically, but I'm sure Michael is going to respond near the end of this, and we'll come back to it. Srini asked if this can handle name changes. He says we add at least 50 to 60 users to Lawson, and it takes 6 to 7 hours, and that's a lot of time, guys. That out of your week, that's a single day out of your week that's wasted just adding users. Handling name changes, I don't see why not. I don't see why you couldn't create a separate branch out of this for name changes. Although you probably wouldn't need to do most of these, so I would probably create a new flow for name changes and just do the nodes that require that. So that would just be for a change for the actor, really, that I can think of. And the
yeah, I agree
for the
completely. There's too many other nodes there that are non-name change specific. It would be simpler, I think, also to start with a different flow.
Yeah. Is there a flow to terminate users? That's Cindy's question. Cindy, certainly you can build a flow to terminate users, but you got to have a conversation really with several different people. You got to talk to your auditors to find out exactly what their requirements are. You got to talk with HR and with your security organization to figure out really what that means for you in-house. So really, there isn't a single flow fits all type of thing for that. I mean, we've built dozens of flows like that for customers where, when the employee terms, we go through and do things. And every customer has a different requirement for that. It's similar types of actions as we've taken here, but yeah, you can certainly build a flow like that. We don't have one offhand that I can share with you right now. Glenn, what about the HTML code? The HTML code is something I just, we have a software that we kind of build security reporting data. So a lot of this was taken, the framework for that is taken from that. It's kind of proprietary to us, but you can write a relatively simple query using PHP or JavaScript or Ajax or any of the tools that are available to pull out of a database. And more than happy to kind of work with you to get something like this implemented, like what you saw on the screen, where we can help you implement something like that very easily. And then Jeff asks, can the flow be used if we don't use Lawson HR?
I wonder if that's more of the staying on the LSF side versus the Landmark side question, because Glenn's presentation kind of touched on this a little bit, based on whether you're using your new hires starting from LSF or from Landmark.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the customers I'm working with right now actually uses a whole separate system for Lawson for HR. Okay, so they've got nothing related to this application at all, right? So they're using LTM, but HR is another system I'd actually never even heard of before. Yeah, sure, you can do that. So you just have to build your query to go against that system. And the way you do that is very likely just using the SQL query node against that system to pull your new hire information out of that system, and then you can get started. Really, there's nothing specific about that new hire query that is, that has to be the way it is. Because, in the case of Brian here, he's written his query to go against his LTM or his Landmark application, but you can write it against any application to pull your new hires out of whatever application you got. Sean asked, what happens when your flow fails halfway through? Do you correct the data and restart the flow or manually add the rest of the component? We kind of covered this, and I'm sure you asked us before we covered it, but yeah, we recommend, I mean, you know, I think Brian and I are going to build this at some point. We're going to build a flow that goes through and cleans this up because it's a lot of work. It's actually more work than adding one. So that's something you can do. Otherwise, you have to do it manually. It can take a good 10 minutes to clean all these up. Let's see. Can IPA or PF be used to add MSCM users? That's a good question. I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm going to write that question down and get back to you, Brian. Do you have the link? So Dolores asked, do you have the link to the original webinar flow at Infor? Yes, I do, and I will definitely be posting that when we post this to the site, and you'll get an email. Because I think without watching Glenn's webinar, you know, this won't be a complete experience for you. You got to go through both, and this recording will be available to you guys as well. So I'd say watch them back to back. That's 2 hours of, you know, edge of your seat fun that you got waiting for you when you get back at this. And then let's see. With the flow, so Donald asked, with this flow, can you force upper and lowercase when accounts are created? Yeah, you got access to the entire JavaScript library, so you can basically do any sort of text manipulation that you like to do. You certainly can. This is a really good place to be cleaning up your data to make sure that clean data goes into the system. So that's a good point. Is there a so Alvin asks, is there a password or user ID to watch the webinars? No, there isn't. We want to make sure that these webinars are always available to you and they're free. You don't have to sign up to watch them. Yeah, that'll be available. If you have any problems watching these, by the way, guys, or if you have any issues accessing them, go ahead and send me an email. It's just tan@nogales.com. That's TAN @nogales.com. And then, and Peter says, a counterpoint about ISS. ISS doesn't come into play for authentication, so it won't affect the user logging in. And let's see. All right, I think that's pretty much it. As Dana asked, this is regarding LSF, so we could query on a text file. Yeah, sure. You could query on a text file. You could be reading a text file line by line and process that. So, for example, that's actually it's a good use case if you've got another system that's creating your new hire records. You could have that system dump out to a text file each day, the new hires, and then you could read that text file and to write this in. You just use the file node within IPA and just read through it line by line and separate the records out and the columns out, and you could go through that relatively easily. In fact, it's probably easier than what we're doing here. And I think that covers it, guys. If you have any other questions that we didn't cover, honestly, it's a little difficult to read through these because there's a lot of repeats, so I have to skip a few things here and there. But if you feel like your question wasn't answered, please go ahead and send me an email directly, tan@nogales.com. We are out of time, so I'm going to wrap it up here. But again, tan@nogales.com, more than happy to answer all your questions. You'll get an email once this webinar has been posted. Please join us next time we do a webinar. We'd love to hear back from you, and don't forget to make suggestions. I really want to thank you, Brian, for joining us and giving us way more than an hour of your time, because I know there was a lot of prep for this. Really appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
All right, all. Have a great day.